We're going to begin this hour with the latest on the massive winter storm that is making its way across the country already this morning.
Yeah, get this, 90 million Americans are under winter weather alerts as the storm's impact will be felt all the way from New Mexico to the Northeast over the next few days. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald is in Chicago with the latest on this winter weather for us.
Yeah, the snow started falling late last night, and it's not expected to taper off until late this afternoon. But we're talking about a stretch of some 2,000 miles from the Mexico border all the way up to Vermont. Now, here in Chicago, you can see we're talking about a heavy, wet snow that's just continuing to pile up here. But keep in mind, this is just the first of a 1-2 punch of a storm that's coming in the coming days. Overnight, the first flakes starting to fly, the beginning of yet another winter wallop.
Here we go again, more snow.
More than 90 million Americans across 19 states are in the crosshairs of what could be the biggest storm of the season.
Travel would become dangerous, if not impossible.
Dangerous road conditions in Denver already causing accidents. In Illinois, the governor issuing a disaster declaration, warning some parts of the state could get up to 20 inches of snow. In Detroit, where up to 16 inches of snow could fall, schools are making plans to go virtual.
I don't like the snow, and I'm 60 years old. I ain't never seen 15 inches of snow in my life.
Detroit's mayor activating the city's snow emergency routes. Across the Midwest, residents are stocking up on essentials and preparing for the worst.
I purchased everything that I could.
In Texas, fears this could be a repeat of last year's deadly freeze that led to a massive power grid failure and hundreds of deaths. This storm is expected to last several days, with temperatures plummeting in many parts of the country. Hundreds of flights have already been canceled, and officials are urging drivers to stay off the roads and stay home.
This could be the most significant winter weather event we're going to see this season.
Here in Illinois, the governor declared a disaster declaration, activating some 100 National Guard members to be at the ready to respond to any potential emergency situations. Now, this is something that we're seeing across the country. Many heads of state urging their residents to stay inside and to be safe because this storm that's coming in the coming days has the potential to be deadly. Back to you.
All right, Megan Fitzgerald, thank you. Really, thank you for being out there for us.
What is next for this storm? Let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Which means it's time for Bill Cairns to join us. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. This storm has many facets to it, obviously stretching for such a huge area. We focused last hour on the snow threats. We want to talk about the ice impacts and the potential for massive power outages that could last even into the upcoming weekend. So on our colorized radar, we show you the green and the yellows where it's raining. The pink shows you where the ice is, either freezing rain or sleet, and the blue shows you where it's snowing. So let's focus on the ice. It's been very icy this morning around St. Louis, but now St. Louis is starting to change over back to snow. So that's also slippery. So here's kind of our winter battleground. Why are we having this ice threat? Well, we have Arctic air coming down from Canada. At the same time, we have tropical air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. And the Arctic air is very shallow. It goes right down to the ground. The tropical air lifts. Warmer air rises, cold air sinks. So what happens is you get a thin layer of very cold air, and that's where the freezing rain will fall. So the snowflake melts as it comes out of the cloud, but then when it gets right to the ground, it refreezes, and that's where we get the freezing rain threat. And that is especially going to be, from areas of Dallas tomorrow morning to Memphis. We're very concerned with Kentucky, all the way up into southern Ohio, southern Illinois, and a good section of Tennessee, too, is a big chance for an ice storm. So how much ice are we talking? Once you get over a quarter inch, you can get power outages. A half inch, you can get massive power outages. If you look at the blue on this map, that's everywhere that has at least a chance for a quarter inch of ice. That stretches from central Texas all the way through southern New England over the next 3 days. This is by far one of the bigger ice storms we've had in a couple of years. So here's the ice impacts. Up to a quarter inch, we get slick roads and bridges. Icy glaze forms on the trees. If you get a quarter inch to a half an inch, that's when you start to see the tree limbs break, scattered power outages, very dangerous road conditions. And if we do get up to a half inch to an inch of ice, that's when things just get, whole trees can come down, roads impassable, multi-day power outages. And that's possible with this storm. So, hopefully that groundhog will be right. We only get 6 more weeks of winter, but that's not going to help us in the next 3 days.
All right. There it is, the groundhog.
Yeah. Oh,
Bill's best friend.
Yes, the rodent.
Yes, he saw his shadow officially. Him and his 38% accuracy rate.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to know Bill has a much better accuracy record.
Yeah. Does he? Just kidding.
I could flip a coin and do better than Phil. All right, I'm sorry, I'm done. All right.
You know, Bill, we did have a viewer tell us that they like when we give you a hard time, so we're just giving the people what they want.
I'm glad that's what I'm here for. Thank you. Thank you to our viewers.
Oh, so much more. We love you, Bill.
Thank you. Pfizer is requesting emergency authorization of its 2-dose vaccine for the only group that remains ineligible for vaccination, small children under the age of 5. If approved, young kids could begin getting the shot by the end of this month. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello is following that for us from Washington. Tom, good morning.
Joe, so listen to these stats here. There were 3.5 million confirmed pediatric cases last month alone. 2 weeks ago, 100,000 younger children hospitalized with COVID. A quarter of all parents say their kids had to quarantine in January due to exposure. So the FDA is really feeling a sense of urgency here. But with low vaccination rates among kids who are vaccine eligible, this morning many parents are torn over whether to heed the doctor's advice and eventually vaccinate their youngest kids. This morning, millions of children under the age of 5 are one step closer to becoming eligible for the COVID vaccine. An FDA advisory panel says it will meet February 15th to consider Pfizer's request for emergency use of its 2-dose vaccine for kids ages 6 months through 4 years old. The prospect that shots could soon be within arm's reach for small children, bringing hope and relief to many families.
As a parent, I need to do everything possible to protect them from possible bad outcomes.
The Prince Miller family has 2 kids under the age of 5, and Mom says, assuming the data shows the shots are safe and effective, her kids will get vaccinated immediately.
It's one of the only things that we can do to protect our children who are old enough to mask effectively, who really can't surround themselves with vaccinated people.
But a new study finds many parents remain cautious about the COVID vaccine. Just 31% say they'd vaccinate kids under 5 right away. 29% will wait and see, while 26% say they will definitely not vaccinate their youngest kids. One potential concern, in a clinical trial, 2 doses failed to produce a strong immune response among kids ages 2 to 4. Instead, only kids between 6 months and 2 years had a response comparable to that of older kids and younger adults. As Pfizer requests authorization for 2 doses to build immunity among young children, it's continuing research on whether 3 doses would provide even more protection. Dr. Paul Offit is on the FDA's outside vaccine committee that evaluates safety.
We want to make sure the vaccine works and that it's safe before we would ever recommend it for America's children.
Hoping to boost vaccination rates among kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics is urging parents to talk to their doctors if they have any concerns.
The COVID vaccine, if anything, is under more scrutiny than ever before, and we just haven't seen major concerns with safety of these vaccines.
Yeah, Pfizer's CEO says ultimately researchers believe that 3 doses of this vaccine will be the standard for the country's smallest kids. But if 2 shots are authorized soon, the hope is that parents will start getting that immunity going in that entire population. Until that 3rd dose ups the protection even more. Again, decision time could come by March 1st. Guys, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you so much.
You bet.
Now let's bring in Dr. Bob Lahita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian Medical School and the director of autoimmune and rheumatic diseases at St. Joseph Health, and also the author of his new book, Immunity Strong. Dr. Lahita, with all those titles, it's great to see you. Good morning. So as Tom just said there, Pfizer says researchers believe that 3 doses of this vaccine will be the standard for kids under 5. So if everything is approved, first of all, when do you think we could see a 3-shot regimen? But also, those numbers in Tom's reporting say not a lot of parents plan to run out and get their kids a shot right away. So will this really make a big impact?
This will make a big impact for most families who will get the shots for their children. I expect, and the data are being accumulated now, that the shots will be available by early to mid-April for the children. Now, you heard in that last report that the 2 to 4-year-old population of children did not have a robust immune response, not as good as a 6-month to 2-year group. They had an immune response that was as good as the teenagers or the adults. So this 3 microgram injection is what we're looking for as emergency use authorization for children under 5.
Dr. Bob, I want to ask you about a New York Times article which found the U.S. has a far higher COVID death rate than other wealthy countries. We've had the vaccine for more than a year here, so why do you think the death rate continues to stay so high in America compared to our peers?
Well, a lot of people are saying, and a lot of medical professionals are saying, that it's due to other factors like the epidemic of obesity that we have. 40% of the population are obese. Secondly, the diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes, which is rampant in the population. And we would say that people over 65, 12% of them have not been vaccinated, unlike other countries where those numbers are in the single digits, like 4 to 8% in most well-developed, wealthy countries.
And Dr. Bob, I want to ask you about a new poll that finds 70% of Americans agree with this statement, that it's time we accept that COVID is here to stay and we just need to get on with our lives. Now, 28% of people disagree, but what do you think? I mean, do you think the virus is here to stay? And if so, what does that mean we do going forward to adapt?
Well, Savannah, I have said for many, many months that I think that this virus is going to be with us forever, and that it will eventually become an endemic infection, meaning like influenza, every year we will probably have to be vaccinated against the various variants of this particular virus. Hopefully it'll be a combined immunization with influenza. And I think it's here to stay, and I think those people are correct.
All right, Dr. Bob Lahita, thank you so much. Always great to see you.
For the first time in more than a month, Russian President Vladimir Putin publicly addressed the ongoing situation in Ukraine. He's blaming the U.S. for escalating tensions, but he's also keeping the door open for a diplomatic resolution. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel is following the latest from eastern Ukraine.
Even after weeks of diplomacy, weeks of shuttle talks between U.S. officials and Russian officials, secure conference calls, video calls, Vladimir Putin's position remains unchanged. He insists that Ukraine never be allowed to join NATO and blames the West for stoking fears and increasing tensions.
As Russia strengthens its military presence in Belarus, north of Ukraine, in striking distance of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, Russian President Vladimir Putin broke his silence. In a wide, socially distanced press statement with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Putin rejected the U.S. and NATO's written diplomatic proposals. Putin saying Russia's concerns were basically ignored. He laid out his demands, unchanged even after weeks of negotiations across Europe. No further NATO expansion, no offensive weapons by Russia's borders, and NATO returning to the 1997 status quo, he said. That would mean lopping off most of Eastern Europe and the Baltics from NATO. Putin is famously COVID cautious. The Hungarian prime minister said he'd never had a meeting so far apart. The Russian president never mentioned those 130,000 Russian troops, tanks, missile launchers, and even blood supplies positioned on Ukraine's borders. The buildup apparent in new satellite images. In Ukraine, even though the government is urging calm, some families are getting nervous. In Mariupol, near the Russian border, Olga and Daniel Repro live in a one-bedroom apartment. They're keeping the kids calm, acting as normal.
The wheels on the bus go round and round, all through the town. Wheels
you know
on the bus
this song.
go round. Do I know this song? Everybody knows that song.
But they are ready to move at a moment's notice to stay with relatives in the countryside or in a bomb shelter.
So these are all the critical documents.
Yeah, passport, critical documents, documents for my boys.
This morning, Olga traveled across the city to sign up for Ukraine's civil defense, volunteering to help the war effort, should Putin decide to invade.
President Putin is expected to visit China on Friday to attend the Olympics opening ceremony and meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. Putin is expected to visit China on Friday to attend the Olympics opening ceremony and meet with China's President Xi Jinping. The Olympics are an unclear dynamic in all of this. Some analysts have suggested that Putin might wait until after the games so as to not overshadow the Olympics and carry out a military action then, or he might use the Olympics as a cover. The last time China hosted the Olympics in 2008, Russia invaded Georgia, and it was just after the games in Russia in 2014 that Ukraine broke away from Russia's sphere of influence and overthrew its pro-Russian president.
Richard Engel in Ukraine. Richard, thank you.
And now to an NBC News exclusive. As the Olympics get underway in Beijing, FBI Director Christopher Wray is speaking out about the scope of China's spying on American soil. He says it's become so widespread that his agents open an average of 2 investigations a day. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams has the interview.
An East Bay tour operator is facing charges tonight of spying for China.
The FBI was tailing him around.
The FBI says this is Chinese spying at work. Edward Peng leaving an envelope of cash in a California hotel room and retrieving an SD card loaded with classified information. A classic spycraft dead drop. He's now in federal prison.
The creation of those counterintelligence task forces.
Christopher Wray says when he became FBI director, the sheer amount of Chinese spying to steal American technology was a huge surprise.
This one blew me away. And I'm not the kind of guy that uses words like blown away easily. We are investigating, opening a new China-related counterintelligence investigation about every 12 hours. We probably have over 2,000 of those investigations.
Other countries spy on each other. So what does China do that's different?
There is no country that presents a broader, more severe threat to our innovation, our ideas, and our economic security than China does. I'm referring not to the Chinese people, not to people of Chinese descent or heritage. What we're talking about here is the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese government has repeatedly insisted that it doesn't steal American business secrets. But the FBI says Chinese spies target a range of American innovations on COVID vaccines, computer chips, nuclear power plants, jet engines, and smartphones, for example, sometimes by planting company insiders, sometimes through its world-leading cyber theft.
The scale of their hacking program and the amount of personal and corporate data that their hackers have stolen is greater than every other country combined.
And Wray says the Chinese government exports elements of its oppressive police state, sending teams to the U.S. to threaten and intimidate critics.
China may be the first country to combine that kind of authoritarian ambition with cutting-edge technical capability. It's like the surveillance nightmare of East Germany combined with the tech of Silicon Valley.
But what about the criticism from Asian American groups who say the Justice Department's China initiative has overreached, with some Chinese espionage cases collapsing?
We don't investigate anyone based on race or ethnicity or constitutionally protected activity. In fact, in many cases, Chinese Americans are some of the people most victimized by the Chinese government's tactics that we're describing.
Wray also accuses China of going after economic secrets in other countries, but he says by far the U.S. is its #1 target. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
We have breaking news this morning from the Washington football team. The highly anticipated franchise rebrand has been announced, and the new name is the Commanders. It took the organization 18 months to choose a new name for the team, a process that began during the 2020 racial reckoning in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Washington has retired its former team name and will no longer feature a Native American on its team gear. We're going to have much more on this later in the hour, including an exclusive interview with team president Jason Wright. So welcome to the Commanders.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.